Christmas morning, I woke before the others, the frost clinging to the window panes like claws. I had spent hours the night before polishing the silver, pressing the napkins, and setting the table with care that no one would notice. I baked pies, roasted the ham, laid out dishes so perfect that Martha Stewart herself would have nodded. My hands ached, the veins swollen and blue, but no one cared about an old woman's effort. By the time the family trickled in, my daughter Evelyn made sure to remind me that Christmas was her show now. She arrived in her red silk dress, dripping with gold jewelry, kissing everyone but me, whispering loud enough, "She smells like mothballs, doesn't she?" Her friends laughed, even my own grandchildren smirked, and my son-in-law patted my shoulder like I was a senile guest who'd wandered in from the cold. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. I sat quietly at the end of the table, the chair they always pushed me to, near the drafty window. The family chatter filled the house, but none of it was for me. They toasted to each other, poured glasses of wine, and laughed about their vacations, their bonuses, their lives that apparently had no room for me. When I tried to speak, just a memory of their father, the Christmases when they were little, the sound of bells outside, I was silenced. "Not now, Mom," Evelyn snapped, flashing her perfect white teeth. "We're celebrating. Don't drag us down with your sad old stories." I swallowed the hurt, stared at the candles flickering, feeling the years of silence pressed against my chest. When dinner ended and the table was cluttered with glasses and bones, Evelyn lifted her wine goblet high, her voice sharp and ringing. "A toast to family that matters." She turned, walked behind me, and before I could breathe, she tilted the glass over my head. The cold red liquid ran down my hair, seeped into my blouse, stained my skin like blood. Laughter exploded around the room. Her friends clapped. Even my grandson took a picture. Evelyn leaned close, her perfume choking me, and hissed, "Now you're worth something." The sound of that laughter burned hotter than any fire. My cheeks dripped with wine, my pride drenched. But what crushed me most was the silence of the others. No one defended me. No one told her to stop. I was 74, but at that table I felt smaller than a child. My body trembled as I reached for a napkin, but she snatched it from my hand, wagging her finger like I was some pet. "Don't bother, Mom," she said with mock pity. "You look better like this. Maybe red suits you." I wanted to disappear, but instead I sat very still. My ears filled with the ringing silence of my humiliation, the kind that lives forever in the cracks of memory. I caught my reflection in the mirror above the fireplace. Hair matted with red, my lined face streaked, eyes wide and glassy, and in that reflection, something shifted. Evelyn didn't see it. She was too busy basking in the laughter, bowing as if she'd performed some comedy act. But I saw it, a decision forming in my eyes, quiet but sharp as ice. I excused myself, voice calm, though my throat shook. "I'll go clean up." She waved her hand dismissively, already pouring more wine, smirking at her friends. They thought it was over, that the old woman would wipe her face and swallow the shame like always. But as I walked up the stairs, red drops falling on the carpet, I whispered to myself, "Hours from now, Evelyn, you'll never laugh like that again." I closed the bathroom door upstairs and let the lock click, my hands trembling as I gripped the sink. The mirror showed a woman I barely recognized, wine dripping down my silver hair, clinging to the wrinkles of my neck, running into the deep lines around my mouth. I pressed the towel against my scalp, but the fabric turned crimson, and I laughed a bitter laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from myself in years. "Now you're worth something," she had said. My own daughter. The girl I carried for 9 months, the baby I rocked through nights of fever, the young woman I defended against neighbors when she stole, against teachers when she lied. I gave her everything, and now she poured cheap Cabernet over my head like I was the family dog. I sat on the closed lid of the toilet, my heart beating hard, but not from the humiliation. No, from the clarity settling over me. Downstairs, I could still hear the music, the clink of glasses, the laughter of Evelyn's friends who had no idea whose table they were sitting at. My table. My house. I had bought this house with my late husband, Charles, 40 years ago. Every tile, every board, every inch of this place had been ours. When he passed, Evelyn swooped in, said it was too much house for one old lady, and insisted she'd help manage it. Somehow, that meant she moved herself in, pushed me to the upstairs guest room, and paraded her parties through my living room while telling everyone she was the homeowner. I hadn't fought it. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe I thought she'd love me more if I yielded ground. But love never came. Only more cruelty. I changed into a dry sweater, pulled my wet hair back, and sat in the rocking chair by the window. Outside, snow fell heavy, burying the street in white silence. Christmas lights from other houses glowed warm, families gathering without venom, without mockery. And here I was, treated as the punchline in my own home. I rubbed my hands together, the arthritis making them ache, but the ache fed my resolve. She thought I was weak, past my usefulness, some relic to spit on. She had no idea that in silence I had been watching, waiting, remembering. Memories flickered, how she used my checkbook last spring, signing my name for her credit card bill. How she snapped at the mailman, declaring herself the owner when he asked for me. How she bragged at her office party about the inheritance she'd secured early. She believed the house was hers, the accounts were hers, my very life was hers to humiliate. But Evelyn didn't know what Charles and I had done before he passed. He left me instructions, quiet little secrets built into the walls of this place, protections she had never even guessed. And now, after years of swallowing her contempt, I knew it was time to open those doors. I rose from the chair, steadied my breathing, and went to the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. The key hung on a chain I'd worn beneath my blouse for years. My fingers shook as I slid it into the lock. The chest creaked, the scent of cedar and age filling the air. Inside lay a folder, thick with documents Charles and I had kept hidden. Papers no one knew about, not even Evelyn. I brushed the dust off and pulled them out. Deeds, titles, a separate account under my name only, with transfers Charles had set up long before his death. Insurance policies Evelyn had no clue existed. Proof that everything, the house, the savings, even the land outside town, belonged solely to me. My lips curved into a smile, small but steady. She thought pouring wine over my head was the height of her power. She thought reducing me to a joke in front of her friends meant victory. But she didn't know what victory was. Not yet. I tucked the folder beneath my arm, walked back downstairs, and paused at the landing. Evelyn's voice carried above the chatter. Can you believe it? 74 and still clinging on. Some people don't know when to quit. Maybe we should get her a kennel instead of a room. Laughter again. The sound stabbed, but instead of cutting me, it sharpened me. I stepped down slowly, my shoes silent on the carpet. The music kept playing, the glasses kept clinking, and no one looked up as I slipped past the hallway and into the study. The study still smelled of Charles, old books, leather, tobacco from the pipe he used to smoke. I closed the door softly and laid the folder on the desk. My hand hovered over the phone. I thought of calling the lawyer, the bank, even the realtor who had begged me last month to sell the land. But no, that would be too quiet, too slow. Evelyn had chosen public humiliation, and so would I. My mind began stitching the plan together as I listened to the muffled laughter through the walls. A plan not of rage, but of precision, the kind of strike that leaves scars deeper than bruises. I opened the liquor cabinet, poured myself a glass of sherry, and raised it toward the ceiling where her laughter still echoed. "Enjoy it, Evelyn," I whispered. "By the time the night ends, your laughter will choke you." I sipped the sherry, set the glass down, and felt the weight of 74 years behind me. They had always mistaken my silence for surrender. They'd soon learn it was the silence of the storm before it breaks. I walked back into the dining room slowly, deliberately, the way a priest might walk into a chapel before a funeral. The music was louder, Evelyn louder still, her hands waving as she mimicked my face when she dumped the wine. The crowd roared at her performance, wine glasses raised in cruel applause. I stood at the edge of the table, and when no one noticed, I tapped my spoon against a glass. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound cut through the laughter like a blade. They turned to me, annoyed, impatient. Evelyn smirked, her red lips curling as she leaned back in her chair. "What now, Mom? You want to bless the table with another boring story?" Her friends chuckled, one of them whispering, "She's drunk off the spill." I held the folder in my hands, its leather edges worn but strong. "No story tonight," I said, my voice steady, carrying further than I thought possible. "Just a reminder of who this house really belongs to." I dropped the folder onto the table, papers fanned out. Deeds, accounts, the original will that Charles had signed, every proof of ownership Evelyn had pretended to hold. Silence fell, thick and ugly. Evelyn's eyes darted across the pages, her smirk faltering. "What is this?" she snapped, grabbing the papers with hands that shook. "This," I said, leaning closer, "is the truth. Everything you brag about, everything you've claimed as yours, it's mine. This house, the land, even the money you've been whispering about to your friends. You've been a guest in my home, Evelyn, a guest who has overstayed." Gasps rippled around the table. One of her friends muttered, "Wait, you don't own it?" Evelyn's face flushed redder than the wine she'd poured on me. She tried to laugh, but the sound cracked. "She's lying. She's senile. She doesn't even know what day it is." I reached into the folder again and pulled out the bank statement. Numbers so large her eyes widened before she could stop herself. I laid it flat on the wine-stained tablecloth. "Senile? Maybe, but not too senile to move every dollar into a place you'll never touch. Not too senile to sign the papers this morning with my lawyer. Papers that make it clear you are nothing but a tenant in my home. And tenants," I said slowly, "can be evicted." Her friends whispered louder now, leaning away from her, their faces a mix of shock and pity. Evelyn's laughter had died. She stood suddenly, knocking over her chair, her voice breaking. You wouldn't throw me out on Christmas." I stepped closer until we were face to face, her perfume sour in my nose. "You poured wine on your own mother's head and told me I was worth nothing. But tonight, Evelyn, I remind you, you're the one with nothing." I picked up her glass, still half full, and without trembling, tipped it over her head. Red spilled down her expensive dress, dripping into her gold necklace, staining her silk like blood. The room froze. No one laughed this time. No one clapped. Evelyn stood shaking, drenched, her eyes filling with tears she couldn't stop. "You look better like this," I said softly, echoing her own cruelty. "Red suits you." She crumpled into the chair, her face buried in her hands. Her friends avoided her eyes, gathering their coats in silence. Even her husband muttered, "Jesus, Evelyn," before slipping out of the room. She was left alone, soaked and humiliated in the house she had claimed as hers. I turned my back on her and walked toward the staircase, the silence of the house pressing in. Each step felt lighter, each breath freer. For once, it was Evelyn's turn to taste shame, and I made sure it lingered on her tongue like the bitter aftertaste of spoiled wine. By the time I reached my room, I could still hear her muffled sobs below. On Christmas Day, my daughter dumped wine on my head and said, "Now you're worth something." Hours later, she learned what it was like to be worth nothing at all. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.